Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the first meeting of the newly formed Committee on Investments and Land Management for Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. I'm your chairperson, Keoni Souza, and we have Vice Chair John Waihe'e IV. The other trustees that are present, Trustee Alapa, Trustee Ahuna, Trustee Lindsay, Trustee Akina, and Chair of the Board, Kai Kahele. Online, joining us is also Trustee Akaka. I want to also introduce our Kapohana, Stacey Ferrero. Please introduce our administrative staff. Mahalo, Stacey.
Mahalo, Chair. Mahalo, Chair of the Board and Trustees, Vice Chair. Joining us administratively, we have Chief Operating Officer Kehau Pu'u, Chief Financial Officer Ramona Hink, Interim Corporation Counsel Everett Ota, Interim Senior Legal Counsel Nichi Ozawa, Senior Director of Hawaiian Cultural Affairs Haila Mofarden, Director of Uiwi Wellbeing and Aina Momona Ku'ike Kamakea Ohelo, Director of Economic and Business Resilience Poni Askew, Interim Director of Land Assets Lori Walker, Director of Communications Bill Brennan, Interim Information and Technology Manager Kevin Chalk, IT Systems Engineer and Administrator Kelsey Wade. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Stacey. And even though we addressed who was in the room, I'm also going to call for a roll call vote for the trustees. Rochelle, would you?
Trustee Ahuna.
Eo.
Trustee Akaka.
Eo.
Trustee Akaka. Could you unmute your mic?
Ale, is it coming in clear?
Trustee Akina.
Aloha mai kākou.
Trustee Alapa. Is Trustee Galataria here? Okay.
I don't see him. Yeah.
Trustee, Chair of the Board, Kai Kahele.
Present.
Trustee Hulu Lindsay. Vice Chair John Waihe'e.
Present.
Chair Souza.
Eo.
Mahalo.
All right. Now, this meeting can be viewed via live stream on OHA's website at www.oha.org/livestream. If you'd like to testify on any agenda item during the Zoom meeting, please raise your hand when that item is announced. When called upon, please unmute yourself. You'll be given the ability to turn your camera on during your testimony. Once you are finished, we ask that you mute your microphone. We are recording today's meeting for the sole purpose of producing written minutes, which will become the official record of this meeting. All right. We're going to move on to our first item on the agenda. Is to approve the minutes from the Committee on Resource Management dated October 16, 2024, as well as the meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2024. Anyone signed up to testify?
No one signed up to testify. Anyone in the room? Mahalo.
All right. Could I get a motion?
Also moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moved by Trustee John Waihe'e, seconded by Trustee Luana Alampa. Any discussion? Seeing none, can I get a roll call vote?
Trustee Ahuna.
Aye.
Trustee Akaka.
Aye.
Trustee Akina.
Aye.
Trustee Alapa.
Aye.
Do we have Trustee Galataria yet?
Aye.
Trustee Galataria.
Aye.
Chair Kahele. Trustee Lindsay. Vice Chair Waihe'e.
Yes.
Chair Souza.
Aye.
9 votes.
Motion passes. Mahalo, members. All right. First of all, I know in the other two meetings that we had earlier, by the way, thank you, Trustee Alapa, for running a great meeting. Trustee Galataria as well. It was great to see you. I'm not going to go down the list, but we all have the bylaws and we all understand by now what these committees are going to be doing. I do want to emphasize that in these meetings, which I always ask for is quality conversation. Keep two things in mind, our beneficiaries, and for this committee in particular, return on investment. Not necessarily talking monetary wise, right? The return on investment for our beneficiaries in all regards. So I just want to make that clear. A lot of information today, so thank you guys all for sticking with us. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, unfinished business. Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is new business. Under this, we're going to receive an informational briefing on the Memorandum of Understanding between the Hawaii Seaglider Initiative, Regent Craft Incorporated, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs regarding collaboration on renewable maritime transportation and sustainable development. Do we have anyone signed up to testify?
Yes, we do. We call him Jermaine Meyer.
Okay, aloha, Jermaine. Seaglider. Yeah.
Point of privilege, Chair. I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate this opportunity. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, this is the first time I'm seeing you in a leadership position in any kind of political. I've seen, Chair Kai and Kahele and the others, but I'm just looking forward to watching you grow in the leadership position. And I appreciate that you took the time to keep Sunshine Law under OHA. And so I appreciate that. You know that I am one for transparency, and so I appreciate that. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Jermaine. It's always good to have you here. Do we need I know the clock. Clock good. Okay. And I don't need to remind you about that 5 minutes. You're a regular here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mahalo. Aloha. For the record, my name is Jermaine Myers. I'm an OHA beneficiary for beneficiary advocacy and empowerment, and I am also a Nanakuli Hawaiian Homestead lessee. I'm concerned about the glider proposal. I did my research. Regent Craft Incorporated, they're a Rhode Island-based company, and they have a website. They just put their team together in 2024, according to their website. They're also working on still building the gliders. They haven't built it any yet. They've only gone through simulations, and it's electric battery operated. Kind of scary to see someone go over the water. 100 miles between Molokai and Oahu with an electric operated glider. That's just my opinion. We do need transportation, but I'm just afraid that, they haven't even gone through any of the federal regulations yet, which regards to safety. My concern is that this is too early with this company. This company reminds me of Theranos. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes. She had promised to revolutionize blood testing. She accumulated $700 million from investors in her startup, which this company is a startup. She even got Walgreens to sign a contract with her to have blood testing machines in their stores nationwide. It was about pricking your finger. Remember the blonde hair girl? Went to Harvard, prick your finger. You can, just out of a prick of blood, you could get your test lab results. She's in jail now for fraud. She got people like Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Betsy DeVos, a billionaire, to invest in her company. So I just feel that OHA, we want to be with innovative investors, innovative products and services. But I just believe that it's dangerous. We haven't covered safety. I didn't see that in the presentation, just the MOU. Also, I didn't see how much money is planned to be invested with the Memorandum of Understanding. And so I just feel that OHA needs to do more due diligence and be more careful with its investments because it's our future. So I just wanted to bring these things to your attention. Kia kuapu, God bless all of you.
Mahalo, Jermaine. Thank you so much. Anyone else signed up to testify on this item? All right, seeing none. I'm going to turn the floor over to Kapohana Stacey Ferraro so she can introduce our presenter, David Uchiyama. Mahalo, Stacey.
Mahalo, Chair. Actually, before I bring David to the table, I'm going to ask Lori Walker, our Interim Director of Land Assets, to come and basically provide an overview of this MOU. And I just want to address the beneficiary that just testified that we're not asking to invest in this company. We have not been asked to invest in the company. We have not been asked to put any money forward. There's no appropriation at all regarding this MOU.
Mahalo.
Aloha nui kākou.
Aloha.
Aloha, Chair Souza, Vice Chair Waihe'e, members of the board. Mahalo for the opportunity to present and clarify OHA's obligation.
Sorry.
by
Microphone.
way
Yeah,
of
thank you.
this MOU. Okay, so a little bit of background. In November of last year, OHA entered into this Memorandum of Understanding with the Hawaii Seaglider Initiative and Regent Aircraft Incorporated to explore the potential of accommodating new sustainable inter-island maritime transportation at Kewalo Basin near our Kaka'ako land holdings. Some high-level benefits, of course, is the increased access and transit options that it would offer for historically underserved communities. It would support economic and workforce development and also contribute to Hawaii's renewable energy goals. Identifying as well federal funding support for infrastructure improvements at Kewalo Basin, as we know, is a high priority for us down in Kaka'ako. That is my high-level overview. It's very straightforward. As Kapohana said, we aren't committing any funding to this yet. We're committing to exploration. And I would also like to introduce Hawaii Seaglider Initiative co-administrator David Uchiyama, Hawaii transportation expert, to share further about the initiative and its status.
Mahalo, Laurie. Members, we'll take questions after David presents, if that's okay. Mahalo.
I just want to clarify, when Lori says this is exploration, this is basically a feasibility study that's being done.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay. Let's see. How do I move the presentation forward?
Oh, we're gonna. Yep, just send it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Next.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll go through this real quickly. Regent Craft is out of Rhode Island. They're developing this electric sea glider, and it's going to go through certification with the U.S. Coast Guard. It has the capabilities of traveling at 180 miles an hour.
David, real fast, if you can move the mic closer to you.
At
Thank you.
180
Perfect.
miles an hour with a current distance of 180 miles. But by the time this comes to commercial service, we're thinking that battery technology is going to be further along and we'll have a greater distance. Next. So this is not new technology. It was developed originally by the Russians. They had the chronoplan in 1960. What Regent has done is tied the hydrofoils to it and electric motors. So this will float, foil, and fly. And next slide, please. So it'll come out of the harbor on its hull, then lift up onto the hydrofoil, and then completely lift out of the water and fly at about 30 to 60 feet above the ocean surface. Next slide. So applications, of course, passenger service, freight, coastal touring, and emergency services. Next. This is the Viceroy. This is a 12-seater. Mokulele has already ordered these vehicles for service. And next. The Monarch is a 100-seater, and Hawaiian has invested in Regent and is in the development or design participation with this vehicle. Next slide. This will give you the specs on both of these vehicles. The Viceroy is very similar to Caravan, and the Monarch is very similar to the old 737s that Aloha used to fly, or like the 717s that Hawaiian is currently flying. Next. The next few slides are just going to give you different cabin configurations. This is all passenger. Next slide. This is the freight configuration. And I think what's important here is this vehicle operates at 1/3 the cost of a conventional vehicle. So reducing the cost of goods to the neighbor islands is a big factor tied to this. Next. Emergency services, ambulatory care. We've talked to Speedy Bailey at AMR. We started this conversation back with the IGA administration. We went to all of his respective department heads that would be affected, then went to the legislature and their committees, and then went to all of the counties. And then when Governor Green took office, we redid all of that again when Mayor Bisson came in, and we still need to go and see Mayor Alameda. Next. We also spent some time with NOAA on Maui and the whale sanctuary, and they're developing a avoidance system for both sea mammals and bird life above the water. Next. Because this is an electric vehicle, sound is very minimal, 60 decibels upon takeoff, but 50 decibels at cruising altitude. Next. So back in 2021, we started the quarter scale prototype testing, and I'll show you a few slides of that. We're right now in full scale prototype testing, which will also include certification from the U.S. Coast Guard. And then we go into production. We're about 3 to 6 months behind. And so we're probably looking at late 2026 to early 2027 for the Viceroy to come out. And then a few years after that, the Monarch will be able to come out. Next. So the next slide is just the quarter scale testing. They tested it in Florida as well as up in Rhode Island. Next. This is our conventional route map that we're all familiar with in this island. But again, because of the cost to run this vehicle, intra-island service can be created. Kona to Hilo, Lihue to Princeville, Ko'olina to Honolulu, within Maui Nui. We actually talked to Mayor Bisson's group before the Maui fires about their concern about the connectivity with the ferry system being possibly going away. So all of these things are taken into consideration. The other thing, so healthcare is kind of surfaced to the top of all of this and being able to have access to Honolulu. The other area was agriculture. And we met with Shan Tsutsui and Mahipono on Maui, and he brought to our attention that his crops have to go to Honolulu, then get redistributed on Young Brothers, and then go to Kona and Hilo. Well, this vehicle would eliminate that. The other thing he brought to our attention was Alun Farms was moving from West Oahu, and a lot of their production is going to be on Kaua'i. So they're going to run into the same situation. So all of these things are coming into play. Next. So these are all the people that we're working with. This is very exploratory. We're in the feasibility phase. We met with the people at Super Ferry. We didn't want to do the same mistake that they did. So we've been doing community outreach since 2021. I've done most of the neighborhood board meetings, Rotary, Lions Club. On Molokai, we did a town hall with Council Member Rollins. And so we've been listening to all the concerns. As you can see, most of the major carriers have opted in to explore this with us, as well as, Kulama Lanai and some others. We have IBEW and the Trades Council, because there is a workforce development component to this, because we're going to need skilled people to be a part of this. Next. So, besides trying to reach our 2045 sustainability goal, we found that there were 4 pillars that really started to surface. One was culture in the community. That was one. Being able to react to emergencies and resiliency within. We have healthy mothers, healthy babies as a part of this, and they brought to our attention that they had to jet ski into Maui to be able to access the mothers there. And then workforce development. There's going to be a need for people in the energy industry, electrical industry, computer programming, and of course, infrastructure build out. So all of these are going to come into play. Next. This is the state wanted to get an idea of what a terminal would look like. So we did some schematics for them. Next. This would be at the location where the old seaplane was, right off of Lagoon Drive. Yeah. Okay, next. 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 This is another location they wanted us to look at. The Polynesian Voyaging Society is over here. It's the old University of Hawaii Fisheries building. Okay, next. So the opportunities with Seaglider, there's a lot of federal funding. Senator Lee has been leading the effort to secure some federal funding for renewable energy. We've also found that there's federal funding for underserved communities like Molokai. So, you know, we'd like to explore all of these options. If I could show the video real quick, it's 3 minutes, and I think it'll give you a little bit more validation of this organization and what they're doing. They do have a military or defense contract as well with Marine Fighting Labs, and it's actually for the Asia Pacific region because of what's been going on within the islands in the Asia Pacific. Okay.
With multiple years of engineering and hundreds of iterations of test experience behind it, Regent is now entering the next phase.
The possibilities are absolutely endless.
I think there's just a tremendous opportunity.
What's interesting about Regent's concept is the size and the scale.
The enormity of it
is just inspiring.
What you're about to see is the full-scale design of our Viceroy Seaglider prototype. We wanted to prove to the world that a Seaglider as an entirely new mode of transportation that floats, foils, and flies was physically possible. I want to sort of take a second to talk about what it took to get here. And it all started with Mike and I, who were just entirely too fed up with regional travel. So we decided to fix it.
Think about the ability to kind of bring communities together.
It's reopening cities that have lost service.
It's going to connect us both culturally and economically with all parts of the world and all parts of the country.
This is a great technology. You see it and you say, gee, that's so obvious. Why hasn't it been done before?
We set an audacious goal to fly in a year. So we brought in an audacious team. Soon we grew the team to 30, composed of some of the best aerospace and maritime engineering minds on the planet.
This is a competent group of people, and every time you meet with a different leader from a different part of the team, you say, Billy picked the right group.
And working together, we did what no one in aviation or maritime history had done before. We flew the world's first Seaglider and demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that this technology is a reality.
When I heard about this idea, I was like, this is the kookiest idea I've ever heard. Some of those ideas are the best because people are really thinking out of the box.
I'm kind of intrigued whenever you see this innovation. That's sort of what's been missing. We've got so much path dependency in the aerospace business. It's good to sort of break away from that.
In an industry that is so reliant on fossil fuels, we are going down the path of creating something truly sustainable.
Making this a boat, I think it's going to really have a big impact in terms of its ability to be brought to market quickly.
Seaglider are actually under the purview of the Coast Guard as a vessel, so they're a ship that happens to fly above the water.
We have $8 billion and over 500 vessels in orders. The first customer to take delivery of a Viceroy Seaglider will be Southern Airways, Mokulele.
These guys are talking about the all-new platform. It's the new platform that we're going to build as the flagship of Southern's fleet. So I'm thrilled to be taking the first few.
We're really thrilled to have ordered 200 Seagliders.
We were in Miami last year to announce the deal for 25 Seagliders.
I salute everybody in this building. What you have done is just amazing. I'm so proud to be part of this. Today is a great day for American innovation.
Thank you.
Mahalo, David. Thanks for that presentation. Members, any questions for David, Laurie, or administration? Trustee Aquino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, David, for coming down here and sharing with us. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm sure you recall the feelings we all had when Super Ferry came out. We were very hopeful that the broken bridges between our neighbor islands and Oahu could be repaired, that we could actually have commerce, travel, families going back and forth, and so forth. And you're fully aware that we're one of the island regions, one of the few island regions in the country and the world that doesn't even have a ferry system. So this is going to be a great contribution. But I do want to ask you this. In light of the startup and demise of the super ferry, what are the factors that you're looking to tell us that it's going to be a different story here? It's not going to be the super ferry in terms of the commerce. Practical operation.
I think community acceptance is going to be first and foremost. Feasibility study right now, which would then lead us to an EIS. But as a part of the EIS, the economics are there because the operational cost is 1/3. Fuel-powered engines are much more maintenance heavy than an electric motor. The electric motors on this vehicle weigh about 16 pounds and can be basically changed by 2 people. And so that's why the military is looking at this vehicle as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mahalo, Trustee Aquino, for your question. ILM Vice Chair Waihe'e. Trustee.
So because you said right now that you guys have the full size prototypes already up and running and they're being tested, where in the testing, is it testing right now just for you guys to hit all the, how do I explain it? To get things to where you want it in terms of what you're presenting? Or is it in the testing part where you're proving yourself to whatever all the government regulations and safety requirements are?
Yeah.
And if it's in that phase already, what are they using as the guidelines to what you need to meet? Like, is it just the aircraft? Because it's not really an aircraft.
No.
It's something in between all different things.
So it's going through Coast Guard certification. So it's tied to Coast Guard application. So besides being able to develop the vehicle so it can be put into commercial use, it has to go through the certification process and meet that approval before it can actually go into service. So we're trying to time this and get to an EIS so that hopefully we'll be able to get the vehicle through certification. And once it's complete, we'll be able to introduce it into service. What would be for Mokulele, because they have other routes on the East Coast, if we don't get to the EIS process and get that cleared and have community acceptance, then when this vehicle comes off of the assembly line, they're going to use it on the East Coast versus bringing it here to Hawaii.
But the craft itself is already done. Like, a guy can ride it and drive it right now.
No, they're in the final phase of completion of the full-scale prototype. And then it's supposed to go into the water in the first quarter of this year. And then from there, it goes through a foiling phase, and then it goes into a foil and air phase.
Thank you, Trustee Waihe'e. Members, any other questions? Oh, Kalamai. Trustee Galutario.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good to see Dave. Nice to see you, David.
Good to see you.
Been a while. I'm curious also to find out what our in-house pilot feels about this, but that's for another day. I guess I'm very curious, but really feel positive about this next mode of transportation. What appeals to me is its ability to access rural communities. And so with even the smallest of the planes, what is the docking facilities necessary for it to get into very rural communities? Would we be able to get it into harbors like, say, Honolulu, or without major structural, having to do docking structures and stuff like that? How does that work anyway, and how would that be determined?
That's what's going on right now, is the feasibility phase and how we would connect to existing docks. That would help us minimize the impact on the EIS side. The vehicle, the Viceroy has a 5-foot draft, so pretty much can enter into Honolulu Bay or any of the small boat harbors like Kōloa Basin.
Okay, so on the surface of the water, how fast can it go? 20, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour?
Yeah, it actually, the liftoff and landing will take only a space of a football field. And it doesn't take much speed for it to lift off because the motors are on the leading edge of the wing, and it's pulling the vehicle through and lifting the vehicle out of the water.
So hypothetically, if there is an emergency situation in Honolulu, but the plane was in Lihue, it could literally drive to Honolulu, pick up the patient and fly off instead of using the ambulance service?
Yeah.
Hypothetically. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Good to see you, David.
Yeah. Thanks, Britt.
Thank you, Chair.
Mahalo, Trustee Galutero. If there are no other questions, mahalo, David. And members, I can assure you. Sorry, Trustee Ataka, you don't have your hand up. I apologize.
Mahalo. I did have some questions regarding some elaboration on what was explained in our packet here. So I saw that mention of transport between the rural communities through the islands, and as we all know, oftentimes there are rough seas and so forth. So I wanted to know what that looks like with the Seaglider and how one navigates through the rough waters and so forth, and how that translates to transporting safely and comfortably, especially if it comes to those that are in need of medical care. I imagine that oftentimes jostling around and having a smooth ride is of great importance.
Yeah, so coming out of the harbors, it's not going to be as rough, and you're going to take off, and the reason it's going to travel at 30 to 60 feet is because in the channels, we have young brothers, boat captains, giving us advice, and you can have 30-foot swells between the channels. And so this vehicle will ride 30 feet above the crest of any swell going across the channel. So it'll be a smooth ride. It won't be like Sea Flight or Super Ferry where you're going with the motion of the ocean.
And when there's very high waves, what is the process for that? Is it where there's just no operations at all, or?
If the high waves are coming into the harbor area where this would take off and land, or right outside of the harbor area, yeah, there wouldn't be any operations.
or
The
even
vehi-
mid-sea?
The vehicle is capable of going through 5 to 8 foot swells with the hydrofoil.
And so I imagine because this is a seafaring operation, certain things need to be in place from MARSEC training and all of that. That's something that would have to take place if it's going to be on one of our properties.
What was that again?
MARSEC training?
I'm not familiar with that. It's gonna have to comply with all Coast Guard regulatory compliance.
Okay. Yeah, that's a common practice that cruise ships and so forth, they need to have their onboard and onshore crew to have when it comes to seafaring operation, just so they're in compliance with safety. And so. Thank you. Maybe something to look into. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Trustee Akaka. Trustee Alapa.
Mahalo. Out of curiosity, when all this comes to fruition, what are we looking at as far as costs are concerned for passengers? Nothing yet?
I cannot tell you what. So unlike the super ferry, Regent is not going to operate this vehicle in Hawaii. It would have to be local companies that purchase or lease the vehicle and operate it here. I can tell you that the operational costs on the Viceroy, just pure cost, is $27 a seat. And then on the Monarch, because it has a larger capacity, it's roughly about $23. So basically we're looking at Maui Kaua'i service. But what the operators charge, I'm not going to be able to tell you.
Right on. Finish. Thank you, Trustee Alapa. Trustee Lindsay.
We're a long ways off still. We're still got to go through the feasibility study. We've identified harbors on each of the islands. And we're going to go through a technical feasibility. So traffic within the harbor, access to renewable energy, facilities like parking and connectivity to public transportation. All of those things have to be done. And then we go to the EIS. So that's why we're looking at the vehicle coming out in late 26, early 27. So we're hoping to minimize the impact and be able to connect to the existing docks. So less of a EIS study needs to be done. So that's what we're shooting for. Yeah. And then the community input has to also be a part of that EIS.
All right. Mahalo, Trustee Lindsay. And members, I can assure you, and beneficiaries as well, that we will have regular updates in this committee. I'm curious to see how this evolves. So mahalo, David, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, David. Yeah. Okay, yeah. We'll send it out. Trustee Ahuna, the presentation packet. Mahalo. All right, how's everybody doing? Okay, exciting, exciting. Okay. Okay, moving on. New business, item number 2. Now we're going to receive an informational brief. I'm particularly excited about this one. Informational briefing on proposed land transfers in relation to OHA's first phase of due diligence for the following areas: Mauna'ala, Kanei'olouma, Heiau Complex in Kaua'i, Kahana Valley, and Nation of Hawaii. So it's been a while since we attended those site visits and had a conversation, trustees. So I felt that this is very, very important. Administration has been working very, very hard in the first phase of due diligence. So looking forward to the presentation. Stacey, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Oh, sorry. Ikalamai, any testifiers for this item?
Yes, we have Jermaine Myers.
Hello, my Jermaine.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
I also look forward to the presentation because there was a lot of missing information from the packet. Aloha, my name is Jermaine Myers. On page 9 and page 10 of the packet, it showed the due diligence phase 1 and the components of it. There were 3 components on page 9 and 3 components on page 10. Unfortunately, the spec sheets that followed regarding each of the property only included about 3 of the bullet points from general property info. It didn't include information about property conditions, the statement of intent, community outreach, financials, and the evaluation of and recommendations. The statement of intent is very important to understand for the Lahui as far as if somebody is going to get it for this reason, can we also get property for another reason or have land transfer to OHA with the same type of intent? Regarding the Ahupua'a o Kahana, the specifications showed that it consists of 5,269 acres with 44 parcels. When I looked at the property information, in actuality, 28 parcels equals 6.79 acres zoned for residential. Over 5,263 acres are preservation. So my concern is, what can you do with preservation? There's a lot of high risks when there's preservation, flooding, somebody getting lost in that region. Of course, DHHL can change with zoning if the land was in their hands. So again, my concern is it going to go to DHHL for them to develop? This is a lot of preservation land. So the other thing that came to mind was, is OHA going to do hemp if marijuana became legal? My concern with marijuana becoming legal and then this parcel being used for it is that when you look at hemp and the component that can provide like hemp seeds for us to eat or biofuel or hemp clothing, that's okay, that's pono. But then when you use it for recreational marijuana or medical marijuana, it has already shown in Harvard reports that it causes damage to the brain. So similar to how sugar, high cholesterol, it causes damage to our kidneys, and alcohol causes damage to our liver. In the same way, high consumption of marijuana products causes damage to our brains. I have some family who are hooked on marijuana and they've shown signs of not being able to to be able to handle, real life functions. Thank you. They have hard time functioning for their families. The next parcel, the only other parcel that I was concerned with, because I don't know nothing about the Kaua'i Heiau complex, but the nation of Hawaii in Waimanalo, Uncle Bumpy Kanehele, it says that it's agriculture. This is one parcel with over 1,300 acres. Again, it's like, if you do for one, are you going to do for others? And then I'm just concerned that he already has had this land for many years, and he has a lease for the land. And so he has housing and, he's able to occupy that land. OHA can use this money for other things in order to put other people on land with housing. And so my concern is that right now it's in the hands of, or when it was in DLNR and now it's with Department of Ag, when it's in their hands, Bumpy won't go to them for money to CIP or improvements. But my concern would be, if it came into OHA's hands, it would be like, I'm a Hawaiian. Are you guys gonna do my capital improvement project? Are you guys gonna help me with my housing project? And then it would, show some type of favoritism, I guess you could say. So again, it's about equitable opportunities for all Native Hawaiians on all islands, as compared to just wanting to understand the intent. I don't want to make false assumptions about it until I actually see the presentation with all 6 components involved. Thank you so much. Kia kopu, God bless you.
Mahalo, Jermaine. And that's fair. I just want to make it clear that, these things that are being discussed today, there is no action item and OHA is not engaged in any type of business. And so we will continue to have conversations and appreciate your feedback. Thank you, Jermaine. Stacy.
Mahalo, Chair, for clarifying. And I do want to just answer the beneficiary's concern about not having all components completed. So when Chair of the committee did ask us to provide an update, it's basically a point in time where we are not agendized to go into depth or in detail.
Correct.
And that's because it's still a work in progress. But we did want to, based off of the request of the chair, we did want to accommodate, so to provide an update. So at this point, I'm going to ask Lori Walker to come back up, our Interim Director of Land Assets. And Ku'ike Kamakea Ohelo, our Director of Aina Momona and OEV Wellbeing, will also be co-presenting. And I just want to provide some context that about 12 months ago, when I started as Kapohana, I had an opportunity to meet with the Chief of Staff of Governor Green. And at that time, he was very interested in working with OHA and DHHL in discussing opportunities for land transfer, because he understands that we both have strategic plans that require AINA to be able to accomplish the work that we've set forth. I mean, to the beneficiaries, concern about all of the things that we need to address, like housing. Well, you need AINA to do housing. We need AINA if we want to do economic resilience and development. So there's, if we want to do food systems, we need AINA. And so, there's a lot of opportunity, and I appreciate that the governor, this is a window in time, and this is historic, that we would even have an opportunity for a governor and mayors, for that matter, to even be having a conversation with us about actually returning AINA that was our AINA to begin with back into our portfolio. So again, no promises have been made, no negotiations have been had. It has been purely due diligence. The properties that we have done site visits to, the reason that those have come to the top of the list, that these are, and there are many, but these were the two that were brought forward by Department of Agriculture and DLNR as two parcels that they would like OHA to consider. So it wasn't OHA going out and saying, we're picking and choosing. It was really these state agencies, or excuse me, State Department saying, would you please consider looking at these parcels for a potential transfer? Because these are Hawaiian communities in crisis. These are two communities that are facing evictions. They do not have long-term leases. And so, again, based on our statutory mandates, we have to, at the very least, explore, do due diligence, ensure that our trustees have information that they can make wise and prudent discussions and decisions. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Lori Walker. She's going to provide you an overview of how we approach due diligence, and then Ku'ike will go into detail on the due diligence that's occurred to date.
Okay, mahalo. I'm gonna do a switch up. There's a couple intro slides that he'll take care of first, and then we'll go into due diligence.
Aloha mai kākou. Aloha e nā kahuwaiwai o ke ke'ena kuleana Hawaii. E ka luna noho kia komike. Kahuwaiwai Souza. A me ka luna noho hope. Kahuwaiwai Waihe'e. Mahalo no kia hui ana. E nā limahana a OHA. Men hoa aina me māko I ane'i. A ma o ka punai vele. Ke aloha ka aina ia kākou pakahi a pau. Mahalo, Chair Souza and committee, for scheduling this informational briefing today. Your dedication to the well-being of our beneficiaries is evident and greatly appreciated. Next slide, please. Today's briefing is a result of a collaboration between the strategy and implementation team and OHA's land division. We'll be updating you on the process and due diligence we've been engaged in over the past several months. concerning potential land transfers from the state of Hawaii and Kaua'i County. Our discussions will focus on the why, the what, and whom in these initiatives. Next slide, please. The why. Generational trauma amongst Native Hawaiians is deeply rooted. Kalamai, I'm going to pause right here, Chair, if I can. And I just want to note that we've passed out physical copies of a revised version of today's presentation, and it's also provided digitally. So there are just quite a few clerical errors in the original version that's posted on the agenda, and it's entirely my kuleana and my fault. However, we have the revised versions in front of you. Mahalo. Okay, so generational trauma amongst Native Hawaiians is deeply rooted in a history marked by colonization, the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1893, and subsequent disconnection from ancestral lands. This trauma manifests in various ways, including social, economic, and cultural dislocation, significantly impacting the identity and well-being of our Lahui Kanaka. The illegal overthrow stripped then kingdom subject of their sovereignty and access to these traditional lands, disrupting cultural practices amongst community structures. These lands are integral to the identity, spirituality, and sustenance of our Native Hawaiians today. The disconnection has created a cycle of trauma passed down through generations, resulting in numerous challenges such as poverty, health disparities, and social fragmentation. Next slide, please. In Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS Chapter 10- one back, please. 10-3, purpose of the office. This is the creation of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and just very simple language. 10-3.1, the betterment of conditions of Native Hawaiians, and 10-3.2, the betterment of conditions of Hawaiians. That's your kuleana, trustees. Next slide, Keololu. In Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS Chapter 10-4, Office of Hawaiian Affairs established general powers. And I'll read 10-4.2 for you folks. To acquire in any lawful manner any property, real, personal, or mixed, tangible or intangible, or any interest therein, semicolon, to hold, maintain, use, and operate the same, and to sell, lease, or otherwise dispose of the same at such time, in such manner, and to extent necessary or appropriate to carry out its purpose. 10-4.2 emphasizes the importance of recognizing and preserving the rights of Native Hawaiians. This statute underscores our commitment to ensuring that these land transfers align with the culture and historical significance for our beneficiaries. Next slide. In Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS Chapter 10H-2, purpose. I'll read it for you folks. The purpose of this chapter is to provide for and implement the recognition of Native Hawaiian people, by means and methods that will facilitate their self-governance, including the establishment of mahalo, or the amendment to programs, entities, and other matters pursuant to law that relate or affect ownership, possession, or use of lands by the Native Hawaiian people, and by further promoting their culture, heritage, entitlements, health, education, and welfare. HRS 10H-2 calls out the significance of self-governance for Native Hawaiians, recognizing their inherent rights to autonomy and decision-making in matters affecting their own communities. The statute provides a framework and establishes government structures that empower Native Hawaiians to manage their own resources, etc. Next slide, please. More on the why. Mauna'ala, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs 15-year strategic plan. Next slide. Is this the clicker for me? Which button? Okay. Closest to the red, so the up arrow of Mahalo Nui. In OHA's 15-year strategic plan, Mauna'ala, under the kuleana na hopena olakino, health outcomes, we're tasked with these hopena makakoho, directional outcomes. Strengthen OEV, cultural identity, self-governance, Aina Momona, healthy lands and people, Pilina, relationships, Vaivai, shared wealth, and Kelkuamana, spirituality. Under strategy 4, it calls out specifically to advance policies, programs, and practices that strengthen the health of the Aina and Mo'omeheo, our culture. The SOs, or strategic outcomes 4.1, calls out the preservation and perpetuation of Hawaiian language, culture, traditions, identity, and sense of lahui. 4.2, increase community stewardship of Hawaii's natural and cultural resources that foster connection to Aina, Ohana, and communities. And lastly, 4.3, increase restoration of native Hawaiian cultural sites, landscapes, kulaiwi, and traditional food systems. Establishing a secure land base is not just about property. It's not just about land. It's about empowering communities to heal from historical injustices. This initiative, this collaboration between the Land Division and SNI, is crucial in fostering resilience and revitalizing Mauna'ala, the spirit of our Kanaka Lahui, our Lahui Kanaka, and paving the way for a more just and equitable future for our beneficiaries. Due diligence phase 1. Right now, I'll pass it over to Dr. Lori Walker, your Interim Director of Land Assets.
Mahalo ku'ike. Okay. So I will just share briefly about the due diligence activities already occurred and the next steps in this intentionally and necessarily rigorous due diligence process. It starts with phase 1, a high-level assessment of the property that can be done internally and rather quickly with readily accessible info to determine whether or not to proceed with a deeper dive due diligence. I'll just go quickly through what this includes. Of course, general property info, geographic location, place names, property address, TMK, all of the necessary legal information, property type, size, zoning, tenancy, owner and seller info, transaction type, purchase, price, acquisition, cost, and urgency of acquisition. Also, aggregation of maps so we can assess what the parcels include, what parcels are included, what the boundaries look like, utilities, easements, and cemeteries, etc. We also do a high-level property condition assessment. This includes physical attendance, a physical site visit at the property. We assess visually existing infrastructure, utilities, structures, and any drainage on the property. Of course, also the conditions and availability of natural, cultural, and historical resources. We also do a high-level risk assessment so we can understand the liabilities that we'll be responsible for. With this preliminary information, we're able to establish a statement of intent, which really is where we identify the alignment with our mission and our strategic plan. Yes, please. And of course, of paramount importance, community outreach. We rely on the voices of the people who we serve that are of these places that we are potentially responsible for to inform how we proceed with management and or acquisition of these places. Of course, as you know, financials are very important for us to consider as well. We assess the risks and benefits. We look at where possible, a 1, 5, and 10-year capital projection. And we also take a look at management and operation costs, as well as potential funding mechanisms and limitations. With all this initial information, we're able to do a high-level evaluation and develop a recommendation towards proceeding with a deeper dive due diligence. Next slide. And then, of course, phase 2. These are just a laundry list of third-party external reports and surveys that we would have to contract for because we don't have this expertise in-house. And we want to be, again, rigorous with how we uncover and investigate information about the properties we're considering acquiring. So that includes a formal property boundary survey, phase 1 environmental report, of course, a professional property condition report. We look at land use and zoning reports and any previously obtained land use permits, a preliminary title report, ethnohistorical study, assessments of development considerations, as well as natural cultural historical resources, and then also a professional review of existing agreements and service contracts, any litigations or complaints, existing physical property and insurance concerns. This is by no means an exhaustive list, or do we necessarily need to do all of them? They will be identified and solicited for as needed, but this is a high-level idea of what due diligence phase 2 will encompass. Yes, thank you.
Mahalo. And onto the set of potential land transfers here. Yeah. The upcoming slides, the next slides were just brief, real high level information on the specific parcels, just so we can circle back to the quote unquote priority list that we have or that we're focusing on right now. Yeah. Okay. Okay. First up, Kehupua'o Kahana, located in the Moko Kōloa on Oahu. Next slide. The clicker's not working. Okay, so this is a high-level overview. In totality, there's 44 parcels under consideration, approximately 5,300 acres of land in total. And as our beneficiary did mention earlier, yeah, we have approximately 26, 28 residential parcels on site under consideration, but the majority of the land there is preservation. There's a lot that we can do with preservation, yeah, especially when it comes to securing, resources, securing aina, securing assets for our beneficiaries. Now, as Lori mentioned on a very high level, yeah, phase 2 due diligence, which is forthcoming, will take a deeper dive so we can inform you folks on the why nots and also what potential mitigation plans may come up to address those. Risks, yes, absolutely. So it's 44 acres in totality. Again, current use is state park. And listed for you folks here is all of the general property information, basically the TMKs. And then in the AI, it's much more, there's way more information. Next slide. And here is just the overview map of Kehupua'o Kahana. Again, it's approximately 5,300 acres in totality. In the pink and the red circle is outlined or circled the residential areas under consideration for transfer. Next slide. Okay, if we can go back. Mahalo nui. In conversations with Chair Chang and amongst the administration and a few of us as trustees, yeah, the totality of acreages that's under consideration for transfer is the entire Ahupua'a. So it's Mauka to Makai. Yeah, and when this conversation came up and we received a list from Chair Chang from the LNR, yeah, and she asked us, well, kuike, what would you folks consider? The response was everything. Everything that belonged to our kupuna belongs to us. Yeah, so we would consider everything, and at the end of the day, we understand from the administration's point of view that it's not our decision. It's our kuleana to inform you trustees. Yeah. However, it's also our kuleana to assist you in bettering the lives and conditions of Native Hawaiians. So that was our response from the administration. So Chair Chang did agree. She said everything, including the campsites. And I said, yes, Chair. We would like to consider everything. And so she left that conversation in agreement. Next slide. Nation of Hawaii. One more. Next slide. Okay, so Nation of Hawaii is one parcel. And this parcel is so the previous parcel, Kahana Valley, Keopu'o Kahana, is within the Department of Land and Natural Resources. That's why I mentioned Chair Chang. Nation of Hawaii is in fact under the jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture, or Chair Hurd. Yeah, and we've also been engaging with Chair Hurd and as well as the governor's office about this potential land transfer. So it's one parcel, approximately 46 acres, and it's agriculture, specifically A2, Ag 2. Yeah, and there are residents there. There are people, in fact, living there, and they have, and so Trustee Lindsay, yes, this is one of the slides that I had to revise and amend because of the clerical errors. So the handout today has the facts. Yeah. I apologize again. So the correction was the total acres in the orange bar at the header. Previously, it was the acreages was incorrect. Oh, page 19. Yeah. So it's 45.6 acres. Mahalo. Next slide. A Kanei'olouma Heiau complex and Kōloa, Moku'okona, Kaua'i. Next slide. Total acreages there is approximately 19.3. It's inclusive of, if you see the map there on the left part of the slide, these 5 parcels, again, these 5 parcels totaling 19.3. Initially, when we were in conversations with the mayor's office, we also inquired for Ho'ovili Road that connects the highway to the beach park, and they've yet to agree to that. So future conversations forthcoming. Currently, it's a cultural and it's zoning preservation. And current use, there's 2 parking lots located there and also a commercial building. There's ample opportunity, to explore what that means for us. However, in this briefing and presentation, we're just going to keep it high level. Okay. Next slide. Okay, in this slide, you will see, and I want to mahalo Anakala Rupert and his hui for providing this information, for our community, for our lahui. Here you will find, cultural and archaeological historical features, sites. And this is part of the entirety of the Heiau complex that Uncle Rupert Rowe and his hui is trying to reestablish. Again, in our charge within the health outcomes of Mauna'ala, it's called out right there in the direction, Mauna'ala or Keokuamana spirituality. It's very important that we also consider, transferring Heiau, that we also consider transferring spaces that held that kapu, amongst our kupuna to reestablish the spiritual foundation of our people. We cannot only focus on culture, we must work in so we can build a wholesome lahui. And this initiative actually came directly from Mayor Kawakami.
when Trustee Ahuna, his team, and the administration met with Mayor in his office, he didn't even let Kapohana finish the sentence when we were mentioning, our inner workings with the governor's office to transfer lands. He said, stop right there. He said, what about Kanei'olouma Heiau? And we said, absolutely. So that's where we are with that. Okay, next. Okay, next up and last on our list is Mauna'ala. It's self-explanatory. It's very simple. This is the resting place of our ali'i. We already steward one of the important critical birthplaces of our ali'i of Oahu. Yeah, it would behoove us to also steward and malama the resting place of our ali'i nui. Next slide. This as well is a single parcel, one TMK, totaling 3.3 acres. Yeah. It's currently zoned residential, and there is a quote unquote, what are we calling it? Kahu house. Hale kahu, kalamai, on site. And then it's currently used as it was intended to be the resting place of our ali'i. And yeah, with that, I want to close up the presentation. Next slide, Keololu. Oh, wait. Yep. So, not yet, Trustee. And then, next slide, Keololu. And with that, I want to close up the presentation and just say that all of this work in due diligence phase 1 was to prepare an action item packet or packets for your folks' review. After this meeting, we will be sending out a digital version to socialize that amongst trustees coming from administration. Yeah, for the Kahana and Nation of Hawaii parcels, which is the largest parcels or the largest packets that we're considering for transfer. And then we're hopeful that on the 22nd in this very meeting that we will be able to get agendized, and then that way we can present a deeper dive into what phase 1 is for you trustees. And with that, we will field any questions that you may have. Mahalo, Chair, for the time.
Members, any question? Trustee Ahuna.
Oh, no, thank you for the updates, especially for the island of Kaua'i. I know there was more lands that they wanted to actually transfer to us, salt ponds, but we spoke with the beneficiaries and whatever they wanted, they wanted. But Kanei'olouma was one of them, and we've been having conversations to our team. You brought up something about the road, because the road is illegal.
So currently the road is under a county jurisdiction, yeah, and whether it's a legal road or not, we're hopeful that we can suss it out in phase 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just a high level overview of what we believe that, well, what we hope, that we would gather information just so we can present and inform this body, so we can get the permission to pursue phase 2.
No, I just wanted to know how to approach all of that, but
Mahalo,
thank you for
Trustee.
that. I've been also talking with Uncle Rupert. My next question is, under Mauna'ala, it's inalienable. The state is on the state. Can it be transferred? What does that mean?
You're correct. So there's a resolution 32, resolution 25, that says that it cannot be, Mauna'ala cannot be transferred, sold, or leased. But we are a state entity, right? So it can't, Mauna'ala has been transferred 3 times in its existence. So when the territory was established, it went to Public Works, and then it was transferred to DAGS, and then it was transferred to DLNR. Now, if you just follow those 3 transfers, it signals very clearly what they think about Mauna'ala and its function, right? I mean, it was with Public Works and Department of Accounting General Services. It's with DLNR, and it's under state parks, and we know, as Kanaka Oiwi, it is not a state park. but it is treated as such. And even within DLNR, it has gone into disrepair numerous times over the decades.
Yeah, no, my question to that is, following up with our strategic plan, right to self-determination, would we be caught under that state title if they transfer that land to us, and will we be able to be us, or will we fall under that governance, because all the former stewards of those lands, they're with the state, and I don't,
Yeah.
we don't have an identity right now.
Correct. So it would transfer to OHA, hopefully. And there is legislation right now that will be submitted by Senator Lorraine Inouye asking for the transfer. And so to your point, yes, it would be under OHA in its current formation as a state entity. And with such time that, a nation is stood up, or whatever that self-governance looks like, we'll have to determine at that point. But up until then, it will remain with OHA if transferred.
I just worried about future legal, I don't like it's stuck under that. We the state. I mean, maybe we are, but I don't think so. But AI, self-determination, those are two critical ones.
Mahalo.
All right, members, if there are no other questions, Kuike, mahalo for the presentation. Oh, Trustee Aquino.
Thank you, Chair. Good presentation, Kuike. When will we have a budget of what it will cost for us to take ownership and maintain the property in terms of everything from personnel, keeping it from being overgrown by weeds, security, handling liability, and all of that? Can you give us an idea as to when we'll be able to look at those figures in order to be part of the decision-making?
Yeah. In general, what I described in phase 1, there is a high-level financial assessment. We would take a deeper dive in phase 2, provided that's approved by this board to proceed. And then we can look more critically at what those functions would or what those figures would look like. It also is contingent on a lot of conversation in terms of what the transfer would involve. Right now, we're looking at no purchase fee, and so that's a clear calculation on our considerations right now. But as far as a timeline, there is it's contingent on the co-stewardship relationship that we would establish with the community to be able to identify what OHA would be responsible for or operationally. And so those conversations need to continue to happen. And on the timeline, which is sort of not very exact at this point, because we're also awaiting determination by the governor's office, lots of conversations. So I can't give you an exact timeline, but when we're approved to proceed, if and when we're approved to proceed with due diligence phase 2, we'll be able to give a lot more clear picture of what those financials look like.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry, mahalo, Trustee Aquino. Trustee Galatario. Oh, he has to leave. Okay. Hello, Trustee Galatario. Trustee Lindsay.
I just wanted to share with the board that in conversations with the governor's office on these land transfers, I made it extremely clear, more than one time, that these land transfers should not be part of monies that they owe us for the public land trust. So I have reinforced that in discussions with the governor's representative, because they could say, wow, we gave you 5,000 acres, or, so I just want to make it clear, and I want all the trustees to know that I did share that with the governor's office more than one time.
And can I just add to what Trustee Lindsay is saying? She's absolutely correct. She was very adamant about that. And those conversations were with representatives of the Attorney General's office, as well as Chief of Staff. And they agreed that it would not be used towards any kind of any kind of settlement. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Trustee.
In fact, if I may interject,
Go ahead, Trustee Aquino. We have Trustee Akaka waiting.
we would actually be taking financial liabilities off the hands of the state. It would be costing us.
Right.
That
is
was
correct.
in conversation to the land transfer working groups and so forth, and our various meetings with the Ali'i Trust and the Native Hawaiian organizations. In talking with the governor's office too, there was discussion on in terms of with the transfer of these lands, what does that look like with it being, let's say, a line item to properly maintain the sanctity of these lands. And also with Mauna'ala, with the amount of aloha and care that goes into the costs of maintaining that accompanying the transfer as well. But to reiterate too, in terms of Mauna'ala being referred to as a park, that has been a very painful and sore point. And in reiterating that time and time and again in each of our meetings and interactions with DLNR, with the Native Hawaiian organizations that lead trust and so forth, there was a resounding agreement each time that I said, this is not a park, this is a wahikapu. It was very well received. And there were even tears in people's eyes because of their aloha and passion in order to do what is right, and truly believing and supporting that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs would be the more appropriate and proper steward to Kuleana, these lands. I also wanted to make note to when it comes to various properties and due diligence, there's a part where we are assuming that liability, like what it was mentioned. And I do have some concerns with what we learned with the various site visits in terms of structures and so forth being up to code, if there's a funerary areas on that the parcels too, and what that means, and if there, heaven forbid, be any natural disaster or an electrical incident, what that would mean for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and are we equipped to be able to financially take on that kuleana? So I wanted to ask the administration, is there any further update on that in terms of our ability to maintain and enforce that structures be up to code if we were to have these lands conveyed to us?
Again, all financial and facilities, infrastructure, all of that will be on that second phase of due diligence. Yeah, and to address any risks that are determined will also come with mitigation options for trustees to consider.
And is there any word from the governor's office or DLNR or the Department of Agriculture when the next land transfer working group meeting will be held?
It has transitioned to our new chair of land and investment management.
And who is the other trustee on that as well?
There'll be Trustee John Waihe'e, Vice Chair, ILM Committee, John Waihe'e.
So it'd be ILM Chair Souza and ILM Vice Chair Waihe'e?
Trustee Waihe'e, that is correct, Trustee Akaka.
Okay, and no other trustees for reasons we would know, okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions, members. Oh,
I was just
Stacey.
reminded by Hailama that in addition to Senator Inoi's legislation in support of the transfer of Mauna'ala to OHA, there are two other resolutions supported by the Lahui. One came from the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs, and Hali'o Na'ali'i o Hawaii also did a resolution, both in support of transferring Mauna'ala to OHA.
Right on. Thank you guys. Kuike, great presentation. Laurie, thank you for all your hard work. I just want to make note, please make note, trustees, that the Investment and Land Management Committee will bring an action item. We intend to bring an action item on the January 22nd meeting to ask for your support, to support phase 2 of the due diligence work that we need to do. So mahalo nui. Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, moving on. Oh, Trustee Lindsay. Rehearsal is pretty soon. Yeah, okay. We do have a packed agenda. Okay, so we're moving on. Okay, item number 4, new business, under new business. And this is our last item. I know this is going to be a lengthy one as well, because I know we have a lot of questions. It's going to be informational briefing on limited liability companies in relation to OHA's real estate strategies and status updates on real estate governance. Anyone signed up to testify on this item?
Yes, we have somebody signed up, Jermaine Myers.
Hello, Jermaine.
Yeah. Big girl, but heavy. Aloha, Chair and trustees. Again, for the record, my name is Jermaine Myers. In regards to the packet information on this agenda item, LLCs was the #1 recommendation. As I've testified in the past, I'm very concerned about LLCs, limited liability corporations. The first concern is UIPA request for records. With OHA's past LLCs, OHA's administration claimed privacy rights as a limited liability corporation. They refused to honor beneficiary UIPA requests. Next concern is their operating agreement violated numerous state laws for public trust lands and assets. I recall Kahana stated the state already have agencies that manage LLCs. And my first thought was the Agribusiness Development Corporation, ADC, who has statutory authority, according to Kahana, to create LLCs. State Auditor Les Kondo had conducted a state audit of ADC. So ADC was created more than 30 years ago. And in 2021, State Auditor Les Kondo completed a performance audit of ADC, audit report number 21-01. I want to share with you some of the concerning bullet points from the performance audit report that OHA can take note of, and that some of the LLCs with OHA had violated in the past. So more than 25 years ago, the Agribusiness Development Corporation was created to develop an aggressive and dynamic agribusiness development program to fill the economic void created by the closure of sugar and pineapple plantations. The agency has done little to fill the void. ADC continues to misunderstand its purpose. ADC does not conduct market research, a statutory requirement. ADC's land management struggles, inconsistent, incomplete, and in many cases, non-existent record keeping. I recall when State Auditor Les Kondo had tried to audit OHA's LLCs, records were missing. Prospective tenants occupying lands without signed written agreements. And persistent criminal activity on its properties exposed the state to unnecessary risks. ADC records in disarray. ADC does not keep an inventory of its land portfolio, nor a complete list of its projects, which hampers its ability to effectively manage its diverse holdings. License terms and conditions are inconsistent with board approvals. Speaking about board approvals, Kahana Crab had created LLCs without board approval, without board knowledge. I found that LLC and brought that to the board's awareness. Vacant properties home to criminal activity. The report stated, although criminal activity was already present on the parcel when ADC acquired it, ADC did not take measures to secure the area until after media reports about a massive chop shop and a fatal shooting on the property. According to a representative in the area, she stated that was the third killing on the property. Illegal dumping of contaminated material on the lands. ADC's board of directors provides minimal guidance and oversight to the corporation, which is against the statutory requirements. And Board of Agriculture and ADC board are unclear on the policies behind the delegation of the authority. ADC board participates in land acquisition is more of a formality. ADC board's lack of oversight allows the executive director to operate with little to no accountability. Board is aware that ADC is not fulfilling its statutory requirements, but it does not hold the executive director accountable for these shortcomings. So there were many other major concerns and too much to, and I noticed my time is almost up, but OHA may want to review the audit report in detail for the highlight issues that are high-risk liability issues to the OHA Corpus Trust. Kia kuapu, God bless all of you.
Mahalo, Jermaine. Thank you so much. All right. Anyone else signed up to testify? All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn the floor over to Stacy. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Chair. This time I'd like to invite Sam Chung, board consultant for real estate.
Good afternoon, trustees. Today, what Peregrine Realty Partners, Linda Schatz and Paul Quintilani will give an overview of the real estate strategies that was approved early December, and as well as talk about a very critical component that was deferred for further deliberation and analysis, including interview with all you trustees and give you a presentation on why the governance piece is important and specifically talk about the LLC structure. Paul, Linda?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everybody, for letting us be here today. This matter that we're going to discuss is a continuation of our October 31st, 2024 discussion related to Hawaii real estate strategy for the organization. And I know not everybody was present at that board meeting, but for those of you that were on the previous board, you probably recall that this has been a very deliberative process following a very structured methodology to develop a real estate strategy for OHA. Initially, we identified the strategic principles for a real estate strategy, and the foundation of these principles was state law, state constitution, the OHA strategic plan, and also any existing board level policies that were in place addressing real estate. We then evaluated the current state, which included an assessment of the internal operating environment as well as the external environment. And this included conversations with people in the real estate industry externally, some stakeholders, and this evaluation yielded critical findings as to the current state, which we detailed for the board multiple times, as well as have detailed in our final report that we delivered in November. We next identified industry best practices through primary and secondary investigations, from which we developed a proxy for OHA's desired state. We presented this proxy to the executive team and the OHA board to ensure that there was an alignment of our recommendations with the expectations and goals of OHA's leadership. And after previewing these findings and determining that there was alignment, we developed a set of recommendations and tactics for the organization, which was presented in October 2024. We developed separate recommendations for investment lands and legacy lands because we believe that the goals of those properties are different. In some cases, they're parallel, but in some cases, they're different. And most of our recommendations were adopted at the October 31st meeting. We're going to go through what was approved, and we're also going to identify what was deferred. but most of the deferred items related to the use of the LLC structure for Kaka'ako, which was one of 4 recommendations. And so we were reviewing all 4 options, but I think it was the LLC approach that we recommended as our primary that created a desire to stop, defer, and have further conversation. And since October, as most of you know, we've had one-on-one discussions with different board members to hear your concerns, get your input, and in some cases do additional investigations, which will provide, maybe in the Q&A, if you have questions, we can provide some additional clarification on that. We've also shared most of this presentation with you, so I don't want to go through every slide in detail, but I do want to hit on some of the new slides that we put in, and then jump to what I think are emerging as sort of the top 2 alternatives for furtherance of development in Kaka'ako. So maybe with that, we could move to the next slide. So the first strategy that we offered up to the Board of Trustees was to increase financial returns for investment lands. And specifically, we recommended 6 tactics: the adoption of an investment policy, the exclusion of development property from future purchase due to risk-return concerns, the improve operational efficiency and effectiveness, create a profit enhancement team to target high-impact activities that can be accretive in the near term, and then achieving pay parity with the external market so you can get the best and brightest and retain the people that you have on staff to drive financial returns for the organization. And that was approved. All 5 of those were approved. What was deferred was the recommendation to unlock embedded value in Kaka'ako Makai by either 1, transferring the property to a wholly owned LLC with separate staff and separate governance, or B, entering into a joint venture with an external party who would be the party that would drive development of Kaka'ako, or C, entering into a master ground lease with a party that would drive development of Kaka'ako, or D, selling lands in bulk and reinvesting the investment proceeds into non-real estate assets. So that was the item that was deferred, but everything else was approved. Next slide. The second strategy that was approved was improving the improved performance management and reporting. And what was specifically adopted were the tactics to use the National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries National Property Index as the benchmark for real estate performance, to select additional performance metrics for the portfolio, which we'll do in our next phase of work when we develop the business model and operating plan for the real estate group, including lands in the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund, which they're not currently included. And just to be clear, this is only investment lands, not the legacy lands. So this is only property that's generating income and is designated as investment land. And then finally, redesigning the performance reports so that everybody across the organization can get some snapshot of how real estate is performing, not just against the national, the NACREIF index, but also on other measures. What's your free cash flow? What's your, what's your return on capital? What's your, there are other metrics that should be included. And so that'll all be designed as part of the next phase. Next slide. The third strategy that was approved was reducing operational risks. And there were 9 recommendations, of which 7 were approved. And just as a note, I think that deferred item 3 is actually intended to be deferred item 2. There's a clerical error on this, but the items that are listed are actually what are approved, and we'll discuss what the deferred items were here. But there's a slight clerical error that I'll try and clean up. But what was approved was, stay with that for a second, was a 10% to 20% allocation to Hawaii investment lands as a percent of the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund, instituting formal staff training, developing an environmental remediation program for Kaka'ako Makai, developing a bulkhead retention and renovation plan for Kaua'i. And as we shared with the previous group, that's potentially a $90 million liability right there. So that's a big item that needs to be addressed. How do we address that? Because if it's not addressed, the Makai lands at some point may be incapable of sustaining development. We also had recommendations that were approved related to debt levels, reducing the allocation to non-Hawaii real estate, and also amending the organizational spend policy so that even though you're including Hawaii lands in the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund, you're only spending the free cash flow that's generated from those lands. Over time, I think once the lands stabilize, you could amend that policy, but because you've got a lot of development land right now, it makes sense that you trigger your spending based upon free cash flow. The items that were deferred were holding each asset in a separate LLC to isolate financial losses to the value of each asset, and shifting Makai vertical development risk to third parties through a sale or joint venture or ground lease. Those were the items that were deferred. Next slide. The next strategy, which was strategy 4, was completely deferred. And this was unlock embedded value in Hakuone, either through a joint venture, a sale, a ground lease, or a single purpose LLC. But strategy 5 was approved in its entirety, and the strategy was to generate non-financial outcomes aligned with the strategic plan while not diluting financial performance. And the tactics are listed there for you. Adopt a built environment ethos, develop environmental hazardous waste management plans, promote Native Hawaiian businesses, partner with DHHL, and be a leader in the care and protection of iwi kupuna. Next slide. Then with the legacy lands, there were 4 strategies that were set forth that were, for the most part, adopted in total. The first strategy was to provide long-term financial stability for stewardship activities. And the key action here is to base stewardship budgets on either a percentage of the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund spending allocation or as a percentage of the organization's overall budget. Presently, the policy is that you spend 60% of the available cash flow from Makai. And that's a volatile income stream, and it's not sustainable. So it's better to tie it to the overall budget or to a percentage of the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund. You guys agreed to that. That was approved. We also recommended creating a revenue enhancement group to expand the funding options. This is through grants, through fundraising activities, other ways to bring more funds to expand the mission and expand what you want to do on legacy lands. We also talked about partnering with other organizations to do the same thing, to augment OHA's financial commitments. And in some cases, these are things you're already doing. So we're just recommending you continue to do it, but to have, in some cases, dedicated staff that will drive those activities further. And then develop on-site revenue opportunities, and finally sell or transfer lands out of the OHA ownership if they're not meeting your mission-aligned purposes. Next slide. The second strategy that was approved was to optimize the environmental and cultural stewardship. And the tactics were approved in bulk, which were streamline the land management plans, engage with the Native Hawaiian community when developing plans, achieve pay parity to retain and recruit the best people, move lands out of OHA's ownership if they're not mission aligned, and adopt an investment policy going forward that targets properties in areas with high concentrations of Native Hawaiian people or lands that have rich cultural and environmental resources. Next slide. The third strategy that was approved in total was to expand programmatic outcomes on legacy lands. And the tactics you can see there, again, I'll go through them briefly, is adopt metrics and report on those metrics quarterly, expand land-based and traditional educational offerings on legacy lands, establish an entitlement team to rezone portions of legacy lands where appropriate for residential use, partner with DHHL for expanded housing opportunities where appropriate, expand traditional and non-traditional ag uses where appropriate, adopt an investment policy targeting legacy lands with rich programming opportunities. If you're going to take on new lands, make sure you can program them and get the metrics and the benefits that you're looking for as an organization. And then finally, expand the use of GIS systems, which is really a best practice for managing large acreage. You can capture so much information and you can represent that information geographically. It helps with risk management as well as land planning. And it's something that should be done. And then the last, next slide, please. The last strategy that was approved was to reduce operational risks. And what was approved were a holistic insurance review to make sure that you've got insurance in place that protects OHA if certain risks occur on your properties. Some things you can insure, but some things you can. And you want to make sure those things that can be insured, you have adequate coverage. Identify, map, and provide mitigation options for on-site risks at each property, and you have those. I mean, owning large acreage, you're going to have risks, and at some level, you cannot eliminate them. The best you can hope for is that you have a plan in place to mitigate them. And that plan is going to require increased staffing, so that should be part of your risk reduction. And you want to integrate risk management into your new investment criteria. And it was nice to hear on that presentation of the land transfers you're looking at with the state that risk management is one of the things that they're going to go through. So that's an important element in a legacy land investment policy. What was deferred was the recommendation to hold each asset within a separate LLC. And the purpose of that was less about governance, but more about trying to isolate financial losses to the value of that asset. Okay, so that's what was approved. And I'm sorry I took a long time, but I know that there's new board members and I wanted everybody to sort of get that baseline. And what was deferred, as you can see, were the recommendations around primarily around Kaka'ako and how to move forward with development of Kaka'ako, as well as use of LLCs as a risk mitigation tool. Those were the two things that were essentially deferred. And let's move to the next slide, please. And given that Kaka'ako is an investment asset, and given the policies that were just adopted that I went through, the primary goal for Kaka'ako, since it's an investment land, is to generate a 5% minimum real rate of return or meet or exceed the industry benchmark returns, which is the NCREIF National Property Index. So that's the primary reason to own Kaka'ako. Now we recognize, and I think it's come back in all the communications we had in developing strategy, that there are other purposes in Kaka'ako as well. One of them is to create a dynamic PICO in the urban environment that can be a gathering place. There's more recently been discussion about trying to provide more housing, and housing is a goal throughout all of the lands and trying to provide for that. So we recognize that there's other things that are being driven at Kaka'ako, but the primary objective is a financial objective. And I don't really want to go too much into, why Kaka'ako has had so many challenges over its history. But if you go to the next slide, we've given you this, so it's in the record, and we shared this with everybody before, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. And go to the next slide as well. So when we finished all of that back in October of 31st of 2024, we said, if you want to move forward with Kaka'ako, here are options. And we, as your consultants on this, said all of these options have merit, and every one of them can be executed, with the exception of status quo. That the challenges and the decision-making process and the staffing issues and the time it takes to move things through the current organization, development of Kaka'ako within the current structure just wouldn't be viable. But you could do, you could sell it and just clear your books, or if you wanted to, you could master joint venture it, master ground lease it, or look to a separate entity that can manage the development, but provide OHA more control. And as we've had discussions with the various board members, what we're hearing from you, and maybe somebody wants to go back to a different option, is that the master joint venture or the LLC option tend to have more support than a master ground lease, a sale. And I didn't hear anybody that said, let's just keep trying to do what we're doing. So if we can maybe flip to slide 15, which is the master joint venture option. This is one of the options. And again, there was support for this. And we think that there's strong reasons to support this. Okay. There's a lot of benefits. You're going to secure external expertise that will advance the development program, and you can do that relatively quickly. The external partner will also bring fresh capital to fund needed planning and development costs. And so those obligations will not be funded by OHA. Now, with that being said, it will dilute OHA's interest in the percentage OHA receives because that's their equity infusion. But OHA doesn't have to come out of pocket to fund these. OHA would also avoid adding new staff. But like any option, there's pros, there's cons. And I think what I've heard from most people that are not in favor of this is, while we've given you a more comprehensive list here, the biggest one is you're not going to be in the driver's seat. If you're going to have a joint venture partner that's going to bring capital, that's going to bring their expertise, they are going to drive the development vision. And if you don't allow them to be the driver, you're either going to get a partner that you don't want to drive, or you're going to end up with no partner because it's not going to be a logical allocation of responsibilities. So diminished control. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I think it's relevant, is if you do a joint venture partnership, you will be using an LLC structure. Okay, so you're not avoiding an LLC by doing a joint venture. You're going to still need an LLC. It's just the LLC will be different than the LLC we're envisioning elsewhere. So there are reasons not to proceed with a joint venture, but the real question for the board is the trade-off, and it's a trade-off between getting control yourself versus having external expertise and external capital. And I think this is a very viable structure. We'd be happy to work with you to try and execute it, or can support this. But it's a value decision. Do you want more control, or do you want the expertise and the external capital? If we could flip to slide 17. So this was the other option that seemed to have more support as well. And this is the single purpose LLC. And again, the idea here is that you would set up an LLC that would have an independent board, a 3-person board, and it would have independent staff that was hired by that board. And that board and that staff would drive the development. They would make all the day-to-day decisions, but OHA would have much more control, and they would have control in 2 ways. They would have control over who's on the board, and they would have control over major decisions. And we'll talk about that in a few seconds. But what this does is it significantly reduces the amount of time that the Board of Trustees, the OHA Board of Trustees, is going to spend on kaka'ako related activities, while having a dedicated staff with professional expertise in development that can drive the day-to-day vision and move this development forward in real time. They're going to avoid, all the delays that happen within the current structure. And you'll also, because of the way that this would be set up, you'll be able to overcome some of the issues with hiring the right people. And at the end of the day, you'll also have liability protection because everything will be contained within the LLC. But like all options, it's not perfect. Okay. I mean, we've given you a comprehensive list, and one of them, and we heard today, is some of your stakeholders are very uneasy about this. We get that. But in forming the LLC, if you do this, OHA is going to be responsible for 100% of the funding. And you got to figure out how to do that. And there's no obvious funding plan. I mean, the options that we think about are selling one of the properties and using those proceeds to fund pre-development. There is some cash flow that's coming out, but you're going to use that cash flow to cover your overhead costs. But it's not enough to cover all of the planning costs that need to be done, all of the horizontal improvements that may be needed. So there's going to need to be more capital. Another option might be to look for a silent capital partner. But then you've got to demonstrate your ability to execute to get a silent capital partner in. So it's not perfect, but it gives you control. So again, we get back to that basic question. It's a trade-off between expertise and capital versus control. And if OHA wants more control and is willing to, either allow the LLC to sell a parcel to seed the development entity, or is willing to write a check to fund the development entity, then it can have its control and utilize an LLC. That's the trade-off. Next slide. So when we listened to everybody, our recommendation was an LLC. We thought it touched more of the goals. We heard more passion for having control and still wanting to move the development forward than letting a joint venture partner drive the development program. But as we said from the outside, this is your strategy, it's your wishes, it's your desires. If there's another structure that you want, other than status quo, we think all of those 4 options are fine options, including a joint venture. Next slide, please. So I shared this, and I think everybody knows what a limited liability company is. And it's basically a common business structure. Most people use it. I don't want to go too much into it, but the benefits of it are limiting financial risks. And OHA, in this instance, would be the single member of the LLC. So even though you have an independent board and you have independent staff, OHA is the member. And so the question that came from a lot of people is, well, then how does OHA exercise control? And that's on the next slide. And OHA has control in 2 areas. 1, you appoint the board. And 2, being the sole member, you have control over major decisions. And what are those major decisions? And I listed some of them, but let me talk about what I think they really are. You get to approve the annual budget. You get to approve capital calls. You get to approve the issuance of new debt. You get to approve the development structure for future vertical development projects, whether that's a self-perform, a joint venture, a ground lease, or a sale of individual parcels that would be developed over time. You get to approve the distribution policy. When there's money in the LLC, how does that get distributed? To whom does it get distributed? Does it get retained? Does it get flow back up to OHA? That's a major decision. Approve the sale of property. Approve a ground lease on a property. Approve a future joint venture. You probably want approval rights over the submission of a master plan or a property development plan that's going to go in front of a government agency for approval. So you have a lot of approvals as those are major decisions. The day-to-day stuff, the negotiating stuff, you let your staff and that board handle that. But when they reach the point where they've got a major decision that's ready to be made, it comes to the board. Some other key decisions that you might want to include as a major, developer selection for an individual parcel, right? Treatment of EV kupuna, leases that are over a certain dollar amount or over a certain number of years. Those are things that you might want to consider. And those would be fine. And OHA, at the end of the day, retains the ability to fire the board and dissolve the LLC. So if it doesn't work, you get rid of them. And finally, in the operating agreement, you're going to put forth very rigorous requirements to have robust reporting. And the reporting is going to be, how are they performing on a financial perspective? How are they performing on the progress of the development? what are the key development issues, and these reports would be combined with what would likely be a quarterly briefing by the CEO or the chair of the LLC, if you went with this structure, to the OHA board. So this issue that there wouldn't be transparency gets resolved because it's going to get reported. It's just going to get reported in a more structured format. Okay, I think that was, I went really quickly. I'm sorry if I went too fast, but I can stop and answer any questions.
Mahalo, Paul. Members, any questions? Linda, one of the questions that I had was, aloha, Linda. One of the questions that I, in our individual meeting with Paul and Linda, was asking basically we got to understand there are costs involved to start up an LLC. It ain't going to be free. If you could touch briefly, Linda, real fast on what that looks like, so that the trustees understand.
Yeah, and I
Do you have that schedule, Linda?
Yeah, I do actually, and I'm wondering if I can just share it. Maybe if we could pull down the PowerPoint, and I'll share the schedule. And maybe Paul, I'm going to send a request if someone can let me share. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to share it, and then I'll have Paul. You want to drive this document here?
Okay, so what we put up in the top box is the current income and current expenses to show what the net revenues are before capital expenditures, and this was from the prior fiscal year. And then what we did below is we put the four options across, and we tried to determine what we thought were the initial setup costs and then the annual operating budget. So for the first column is the LLC and the second column is the joint venture. The joint venture we think is going to take a little bit more to set up because you're going to have land transfer fees, you're going to have consultant advisors, you're going to need to do some other things, an RFP process. But at the end of the day, the operating costs for the LLC and the operating cost, the annual operating budget for the joint venture are about the same. Now, want to reiterate, your joint venture partner will pay that $1.9 million under the joint venture structure, but it will be a cost to the joint venture. So it's part of their equity. So they're diluting your returns every time they spend $1.9 million, right? Whereas under the LLC structure, you're going to be spending about $2 million a year. But as you can see up in the box above, that's going to be covered by your operating cash flow. And these are all best estimates. There's a lot that goes into it, but we figured what the staff composition would look like. So we had a staffing program that yielded staff compensation.
Mm-hmm. So either scenario, OHA is paying through, whether it's the diluted profits in the JV structure or just sort of outright. So it's somewhat, I wouldn't say it's completely apples to apples, but OHA is paying a relatively, there are equivalent costs to some degree in terms of both structures.
All right. Trustee Aquino.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Paul and Linda, for your presentation. I also appreciate the fact that you made yourselves available to us prior to today's meeting. So a lot of the detail we've been able to discuss. My concern about the LLC structure is not the cost of the LLC structure. And I recognize that regardless of whether we do a single purpose LLC or a master joint venture, we're going to make use of LLC at some point. And we do so already for protection in terms of our North Shore property, the falls. So please understand, I don't have a recommendation against an LLC. I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence before proceeding. regardless of the structure we have. And the reason we need to do due diligence on the LLC structure is partly that we owe it to our beneficiaries who have concerns. There has been a history in the Hawaiian community in terms of the use of LLCs that has been problematic. And that largely began in the 1990s with the Kamehameha School's Bishop Estate, a private trust that established LLCs that, according to those who reviewed it ultimately and formed a group called Broken Trust, were used to hide fiscal mismanagement. And that's the conclusion you'll see documented in a book written by Randall Roth and Judge Samuel Wilder King, Broken Trust. And in Broken Trust, it chronicles the problems that Kamehameha School's Bishop Estate had, and many of them had to do with their formation of LLCs that hid fiscal mismanagement. Now the story continues, and Randall Roth tells the story, and he came to the board here at OHA on May 25th, 2017. And this is in our minutes. This is his written statement. I'll just read a very short part of it. But his concern had to do with the fact that he saw what was going on at OHA at that time in the years 2012 to 2016 in the formation of LLCs, some parallels to what happened in Bishop Estate. In fact, one of his concerns was that the OHA's LLCs were, quote, reminiscent of drop-down entities that Kamehameha School's Bishop Estate, a multi-million-dollar private trust created in the 1990s to hide fiscal mismanagement. And here are a couple of things that he said. In fact, I'll just read one thing that he said to our board. Either way, OHA and OHA trustees cannot properly use wholly owned LLC subsidiaries to avoid otherwise applicable legal duties, such as a trustee's duty to provide full accountings when legally required to do so, or a government official's duty to comply with procurement and sunshine laws. And his point is well taken, because in certain instances, through some independent audit reports that we commissioned, we found that some of those things took place. So my concern is not to be against LLCs, but to make sure that we do our due diligence before we choose the governance structure. And in particular, I would recommend to our board that we get very good legal review on this issue so that we will be able to see that the structure we choose with regard to LLCs will allow us to maintain our fiduciary duties for accountability and transparency. That's a very important thing to do. And I think that while I appreciate Breregan's recommendation, and I give merit to it, they are playing a certain role in our real estate development and a certain kind of expertise. But we need legal expertise to tell us as fiduciaries that we as trustees will not be forfeiting our fiduciary duties. We will not be failing at it by going into a certain form of LLC. I think it would behoove us to make sure whatever structure we use, we actually have that kind of review and due diligence of. That would be very important. I do have another comment, but I'll just stop there because others may want to interject at this point.
Trustee.
The other point I wanted to make is that I hope that we will give ourselves time and do the due diligence to discern between which of the two structures we should use, a single purpose LLC or a master joint venture. And again, as Paul points out, there are merits and costs to each of these. But a master joint venture, while it gives us less control, could be an ideal situation to give us more expertise, to give us a partner that has capital. And that would be wonderful if that partner also shared the same beneficiary base. I have absolutely no relationship to or background knowledge, and this is totally speculative, but what if we found a partner like Kamehameha Schools? They would have the expertise, they would have the capital, and they would share the beneficiary base so that the less profit that we made would still go to Hawaiian beneficiaries. Now that's completely a speculation I put out there, but I mention it because I think it's good for us to give it a shot to see whether or not there is such a partner that we could consider. in which case the liabilities in terms of our fiduciary responsibilities would also be lessened. So those are the two comments I'd like to make, Mr. Chair. And in particular, I'm hoping that we will get that legal review that would be of great value to us.
Right on, mahalo, Trustee Aquino. I just want to make note that I don't know what trustees he was talking about in that document, but these trustees are not those people. And we're moving forward. It's a new time here at OHA. So we're going to make sure we do our homework. That being said,
May I just respond to that?
absolutely, Trustee.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely in agreement with you, Chair. We have a board of firmly committed people of high integrity. I believe that. And that's the reason I believe we will want to show to our beneficiaries and to the public the highest level of transparency on this issue. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely agree, Trustee. Thank you. That being said, we have been talking about this for a while now, and we have had opportunities to do our due diligence, right? And also to get legal advice. I do want to make note, however, we have intentions of bringing this to the board in the near future for a future board meeting. So, you know, maybe in 2 weeks, just to give you the heads up. We haven't decided that yet. If there are more questions that trustees and members have, I encourage you to reach out to both Paul and Linda. Just like my kids, we all have homework for the next 2 weeks. Go ahead, Trustee.
Mr. Chair, I would appreciate it if we give consideration to getting that legal review to ensure that whatever structure we look at will be consistent with our being able to keep our fiduciary responsibilities for accountability and transparency, both internal and to state agencies.
Absolutely, Trustee. And as you come to the board meeting and ratify your vote in the future, I would encourage you to also seek legal advice ahead of time because you are a vote and a voice. And so I would encourage that. Mahalo, Trustee. And other members as well, please do your homework because this is something very, very important. And it's on the agenda because it was a very important agenda item. And I do want to make note, we just attended the budget briefing at the Capitol, right? And both WAM and House, right? Ways and Means and the House Finance Committees both asked the question, and we're very concerned about our real estate tactical plan being finalized. And just to keep that in mind, as we do go to the Capitol and we do ask for entitlements and restrictions, right, to be lifted on certain parcels, it's important to keep that in mind that they are also watching what we do and they want to make sure we understand what we're doing as far as running a business and getting the maximum potential of revenue on these parcels and doing right by our beneficiaries. So I just want to make note of that. That is very important to note that they did ask those questions. But I do understand your concerns, Trustee Aquino. Mahalo.
Thank you for understanding. And I fully support and am with you in terms of the speed with which we need to proceed to succeed in Mauna'ala.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we, as OHA, seek the legal counsel that we need. I'll appreciate that review.
Right. Thank you very much, Trustee.
Thank you, Chair.
Sam John.
Thank you, Trustee. I think regarding what Paul was mentioning, whether the trustees consider a LLC structure a joint venture, I think what I want to emphasize that under both structures, LLC is going to be required. And if you're looking at a limited liability company with 100% owned by OHA, it doesn't preclude you from doing a joint venture, whether it's on one parcel or all the parcels. But I think, you know, what Trustee Tina was saying, we do need to, you know, look at the legal aspect of it, and maybe it's subject to a legal review that is allowed. But you know, one thing that LLC benefit it gives compared to where we're at today, which is status quo, is that I think the challenge has been the ability to make decisions. Real estate development, you know, by nature, it has to move, whether that's being slowed down by procurement, you know, a simple thing like, you know, we're looking at, you know, potentially getting a demo permit on Lot E, but the procurement process does slow things down in terms of the timing of it, and the risk of not being able to move quick and not having the adequate staff that's required because of the restrictions on compensation as a state agency, I think that also inhibits the ability to get a development moving. But development business by nature does need to move at real time.
Members, any other questions? Trustee Ohuna. Your mic, Trust. Thank you.
I just wanted to speak up for the school that I attended for 13 years, Kamehameha Schools. You know, they had amazing trustees back then and amazing trustees today and throughout the years. You know, when I look at these situations from 50,000 feet, you know, what I see was amazing. What Kamehameha Schools was doing is protecting their trust. When you have LLCs, it protects you from lawsuits and things, but not just that. They went from $1 million corporation to $1 billion corporation. But the thing that I want to say to all of this, you know, when I look at my, you know, I want to give my legal theories to all of this too, or opinion. When you look at those trustees and, you know, I don't know how bad we can talk about them or what they did wrong. You know, I can't figure it out, but how many of them went to jail? 0. Do you know why?
I think that's irrelevant, Trustee. If we can stick to the agenda item.
No, I mean, I'm good people, man. It's like good people.
For the sake of time, thank you.
My Kamehameha trustees. So I just want to make sure that we understand that they did a lot of good things too as well. So thank you for that.
More. So anyway, Trustee, just to clear it up, what I meant was when we bring in the action item to the board from this committee, it is meant to complete our real estate tactical plan, whatever that looks like. There is 4 recommendations by real estate consultants. I'm not saying which one it's going to be because we're all going to take the vote at the end of the day. So in the meantime, I just want to make sure that we are reviewing the slides, the materials, reaching out to attorneys or legal consultation, whatever you may need in order to do your homework and come back to the board and be ready to go. So mahalo anui. If there's no other questions, I'll look for a motion to adjourn this meeting. So moved. Made by Trustee Lindsay, seconded by Trustee Luana Alampa. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
Trustee Akaka,
Aye.
Trustee Akina, Trustee Alapo,
Aye.
Trustee Lindsay, Trustee Waihe'e,
Yes.
Chair Souza.
Aye. Please now adjourn. Mahalo members.